Hello, America, and to our friends around the world, greetings and welcome back to Joe Navarro's What Everybody is Saying, an ex FBI agent's guide to speed reading people. Yesterday, we left off with ending it at the torso shield, and I decided to incorporate that image in here again. Figure 32, a sudden crossing of the arms during a conversation that could indicate discomfort. The torso shield, when it is impractical or socially unacceptable to lean away from someone or something we dislike, we often subconsciously use our arms or objects to act as barriers. All right, I'm going to interject with this one and try to be as brief as possible. A barrier, your arms are crossed. The other one is you may have observed holding the book or a clipboard across your chest. This is a shield. All right, this next one, bear with me. Men, when you're interacting with a woman whom you've met at a social gathering, your drink or food being held in front of you is also a shield. When you're interacting with someone with whom you're attracted, you keep your drink in your hand, the hand you're holding it, and you drop it down to your waist as if you're putting your hand on the butt of a pistol that's holstered. You don't have to bend your elbow, as if it were holstered, but in that general area. And it's a disarming move, ironic, I know, because of the analogy or the imagery I just used. What this does is when you're interacting with somebody is it takes that barrier of that drink away and it opens you, it exposes you, and it makes you seem more approachable. And again, I did single out men, but this is anybody, men or women, boys or girls, that when you're interacting with somebody, in order to uh, do those steps that build comfort, that is one of those that will do that. Also, you know, you're doing the front to front thing. Sometimes that will be perceived, especially between man to woman, that will be perceived as confrontational. Being at a 45-degree angle to one another, think of your shoulders of you and the person whom you're speaking having a door hinge. And so position your body slightly bladed at about 45-degree angle. So you're looking at each other, but you're not confrontational. And then put your drink down at your hip, and you're going to seem a lot more open. All right. Wasn't as brief as I wanted, but hopefully the message has been conveyed. Any questions, ask them in the comments. I'll be more than happy to go on and explain it or try to find a video reference for you. Clothing or nearby objects. Oh, yeah. So the end of the sentence was, use our arms or objects to act as barriers. Clothing or nearby objects also serve the same purpose. For instance, a businessman may suddenly decide to button his jacket when talking to someone with whom he is uncomfortable, only to undo the jacket as soon as the conversation is over. Buttoning a jacket, of course, is not always an indication of discomfort. Often men will button their jackets to formalize a setting or to show deference to their boss. It is not the kind of total comfort we might find at, say, a barbecue, but neither does it indicate uneasiness. Clothing and how we attend to our clothes can influence perceptions and are even suggestive of how approachable or open we are to others. And he references Knapp and Hall, 2002, pages 206, that's 206 through 214, 214. It has always been my impression that presidents often go to Camp David to accomplish in polo shirts what they can't seem to accomplish in business suits 40 miles away at the White House. There's a popular picture, at least when I was in school, of President Carter. I, hosting, I think it was Yasser Arafat and the Israeli leader at the time. Maybe uh, I can't remember who that was then. At the in the 70s. Anyway, where he's wearing a polo shirt at Camp David. So, um, and keep in mind, schools are big fans of Jimmy Carter because of the Department of Education and all that wasted money, and the teachers unions and all that nonsense. By unveiling themselves ventrally with the removal of coats, they are saying, I am open to you. Presidential candidates send this same nonverbal message at rallies when they get rid of their jackets, their shields, if you will, and roll up their shirt sleeves in front of the common folk. You'll see uh, a congressman from Ohio, Jim Jordan, do the sleeve roll up thing. He's gone to law school, he's been in Congress for a while, but he presents well when the cameras are on, and he'll have his sleeves rolled up to project that image of the middle class, hardworking American that's just trying to bust through the lies and get to the truth. But when push came to shove, he turned out to be as empty as Trey Gowdy. Perhaps not surprisingly, women tend to cover their torsos even more so than men, especially when they feel insecure, nervous, or cautious. A woman may cross her arms over her stomach, just under the breast, in an effort to shield her torso and comfort herself. She may cross one arm across her front and grab the opposite arm at the elbow. Ah, ah. If you watched the debate with uh, Kamala Killamall Harris, as I tend to call her, she did the hand under the chin and the single arm blocking her chest in that very condescending look that women will do. And it's not quite the same thing. But she was using the podium as a surrogate for her arm by even if it wasn't touching the podium was there to guard her arm and block her chest. She was trying to come across as, oh, you're going to lecture me. Yeah, you kept wrongfully convicted men in prison and used them as slave labor. In addition to that, you rented them out to make money for the state in dangerous firefighting work. Furthermore, you kept a man illegally on death row until finally the Supreme Court ordered you to release him. So, no matter what anybody thinks negatively of President Trump, it would have been a far darker scenario with Killamal Harris as president. And so, going back to that, she used the podium and that single arm to block, even though she was coming across as preachy condescending. She may cross one arm across her front and grab the opposite arm at the elbow, forming a barrier to her chest. Both behaviors subconsciously serve to protect and insulate, especially in social situations where there is some discomfort. On campus, I often see women place their notebooks across their chest as they walk into class, particularly for the first few days. As their comfort level increases, they will shift to carrying their notebooks at their sides. All right, the social engineering thing that you can do is you can do experiments with people. You can do the notebook thing, and cover it because people are going to respond to it. That if you're protecting yourself, there must be a reason, a threat to be protected from. And to play on that, so if you go in there with a clipboard, especially if you do the utility worker vest, the hard hat, work boots, and then you've got a clipboard with what looks like work orders or directions and so forth. And you're issuing information, but you've got the clipboard covering you up. It's going to make them anxious about, oh, maybe there really is a natural gas leak or something. Um, and then if you can watch their body language, be on guard, but then if you take the clipboard away, if you remove the hat even, after, in addition to that, and put both items off to the side, you're going to see that they're going to become a lot more relaxed. So let's see. They will shift to carrying their notebook at their. Oh, okay. So as their comfort level increases, they will shift to carrying their notebooks at their sides. On test days, this chest shielding behavior tends to increase, even among male students, because uh, it's a level of confidence. You don't feel confident, if you're shielding yourself, and that is for the men. That is something that attracts women. Is this man legitimately confident? Women will also use backpacks, briefcases, or purses to shield themselves, especially when sitting alone. Just as you may pull a comforter on while watching television, putting something across the ventral torso protects and soothes us. Objects we draw toward us, especially ventrally, are usually placed there to provide the comfort we need at that moment, whatever the situation. When you witness people protecting their torsos in real time, you can use it as an accurate indicator of discomfort on their parts. By carefully assessing the circumstances, the source of that discomfort may allow you to help them or at least better understand them. All right, right now there's a huge epidemic of people not being able to communicate with each other. There are a lot of unwell individuals out there who are looking for a reason gain what I call click clout. They'll whip out their phone and stage an incident, just as I referenced the Nancy Mace issue in April of 2025, with the man asking about the public, Q and A's. The point is, you can. I always advocate that people, in particular men, because of the current climate, have body cameras that they can use to protect themselves from false allegations. But more to the point, if you want to exude confidence, don't use things to block you. Keep your arms at your side and walk with purpose. Not fast. I had a friend. Whenever he'd ask me to drive him to a location, and he was just radiating anxiety that he would just walk nervously fast. And my walk wasn't quite the John Wayne swagger walk, but it's more deliberate and intentional. He'd be at the door going into the store as I was halfway between my vehicle and the door because I'm looking at everything going on. Is there anybody in the parking lot that I need to be aware of? Anybody threatening? Anybody casing? Anybody casing the parking lot? Eyeballing my vehicle? Anybody threatening going into the store? Whatever. I mean, it's just the way that my mind works. But I keep my arms at my side relaxed when I'm doing this because I'm just taking in the information and making my, you know, inventory of it all. All right, let's see. Be careful. Let's see. When you witness people protecting their torsos in real time, you can use it as an accurate indicator of discomfort on their parts. Carefully assessing the circumstances, the source of that discomfort may allow you to help them or at least better understand them. Men, for whatever the reason, perhaps to be less conspicuous, will shield their torso but in more subtle ways. A male may reach across the front of himself to play with his watch, or as Prince Charles of England often does when he is in public, reach over and adjust his shirt sleeve or play with his cufflinks. A man may also fix his tie knot, perhaps longer than usual, as this allows for the arm to cover the ventral area of the chest. All right, I've got some thoughts on this. One moment. All right, so let me reread that sentence. A man may also fix his tie knot, perhaps longer than usual, as this allows for the arm to cover the ventral area of the chest and neck. Now, I want to go back to cover this a little bit because this is important for you because of this paragraph, men, deals specifically with you. That is like a neon sign to the, I'm presuming, woman with whom you're attracted and trying to develop a connection with. If they see you playing with threads on a shirt or pulling at your, shirt sleeve cuffs or playing with your watch, they might be okay with you playing with your, adjusting your necktie once, but more than that, it's all going to radiate insecurity. They're going to lose interest, and if anything, they're going to target you, those explosive personality types, and unfortunately, they don't walk around with warning signs, so they're all potentially radioactive, which is the tie-in to the body camera thing. If they perceive you as lacking confidence, they're going to perceive you as weak. If they perceive you as weak, they are going to abuse you. Think of Daniel Pearson, who was wrongfully locked up for a month by, a false claim from Angela Baramova because she just didn't like the way he appeared. And if you think you're better than him, you need to dump a 5-gallon bucket of ice water in your head because there's nothing better about you than about him. He's a hardworking man, a family man, a father of two, if I'm not mistaken, and comfortably, has, he's married. That didn't matter. This, he worked, if I'm not mistaken, he works for himself. That didn't stop that upstart 20-something-year-old from filing a false allegation. And it could have just been something, nervous about him because he's anxious about trying to pay bills because that's your priority in life. You want to know how to survive. And she saw that and she made the false allegations. And the police are just as culpable because they sat on their butts and did nothing for over a month. All of them, Angela Baramova, the prosecutor, and the local law enforcement, they all need to have their necks stretched. Now, let's get back to here. But I want to put that across. Anything that demonstrates nervousness is going to be viewed as weakness. That's the main thing I want to get across to you. You don't want to be in a situation where you're wrongfully locked up because there's no recourse for you. I mean, there is, but I don't want to keep saying it because eventually I'll get a knock on the door and whatnot. But bottom line is, they're thugs with guns, and if you are one bad apple spoils the bunch. You guys have a back the blue mentality that protects each other rather than holding them accountable. Portland, you've got a big problem. Seattle too, you got a big problem. I called out the Pierce County Sheriff earlier today on X about not dealing with Pierce County's rogue judges while he was celebrating the judges who were harboring the TDA gang members. But that's this is April 2025 of when all this stuff is happening, so keep it in perspective. All right, so I was in a supermarket checkout. These are forms of shielding that transmit that the person is slightly insecure at that moment. That's what I just spent the last 5 minutes on. Huh? I was in a supermarket checkout line waiting for the woman in front of me to conclude her transaction. She was evidently using a debit card and the machine kept rejecting it. Each time she swiped the card and entered her PIN number, she would await the machine's response with her arms crossed across her chest until finally she gave up and walked away exasperated. Each time the card was rejected, her arms and grip got tighter, a clear sign that her annoyance and discomfort were escalating. All right. I've referenced in other videos about playing poker and being able to pay my mortgage. My friend with the anxiety issue rushing into the store the way that he did the same thing. I remember he was paying for it and he came short of throwing a temper tantrum because it wasn't working the way he wanted it to work. Don't be like these people. Breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth, and recognize it's fine. People may get annoyed that you're taking that long at the point of sale machine, but who cares? There's at least three to a dozen or more of those, checkout stands and point of sale machines. All you're doing is it's an addiction. You're feeding your anxiety addiction by behaving in such a manner to make you more prone to behave excited, anxious in a stressed situation. And anybody that's been in a stressed situation knows that they are the most unreliable people to have in a stress situation because they panic and they're not usable. And it's that scene from Airplane where everybody's standing in line when the woman is freaking out and come on, get a hold of yourself, as Leslie Nielsen's shaking her, and then the nun is slapping her, and then somebody's got a revolver, and another one's got a baseball bat, so on down the line, because number one, they're useless in a stress environment. Number two, it's an infection that will spread to others that are also weak-minded. Children can be seen to cross or lock their arms across their bodies when upset or being defiant, even at an early age. These shielding behaviors come in a variety of forms, from arms crisscrossed over the belly to crossing the arms high with hands grasping opposite shoulders. All right, the insert here of figures 33 and 34. In public, many of us comfortably cross our arms while waiting or listening to a speaker. Around the house, we rarely sit this way unless something is bothering us, like waiting for a late ride. Figure 34, crossed arms with hands tightly gripping the arms is definitely an indication of discomfort. Students often ask me if it means there is something wrong with them if they sit in class and cross their arms in front of themselves. The question is not whether something is wrong, nor does this posture mean they are blocking the teacher out. Arms intertwined across the front is a very comfortable pose for many people. When I was well into having, my behavioral training, my body language training, I remarked to my mother that her arms crossed does give her the perception of shutting down anything that somebody would be saying to her. And she insisted and still insists that that's a comfortable pose for her. I'm not going to keep, attempting to shame her because that's just going to create friction. And whether that's true or not, that's on her. The bottom line is just as Joe Navarro says here, it's a very comfortable pose for many people. Keep that in mind. That's the reason it is imperative to baseline and see if and when they cross their arms and if they're gripping it tightly. If they cross their arms the moment you say, well, the bill for this just went up 100%, of course they're going to cross their arms because the last thing somebody wants to hear is that their bill just went up that much. For like an automobile service or something. However, when a person suddenly crosses arms and then interlocks them tightly with a tight hand grip, this is indicative of discomfort. Remember, it is by gauging changes from baseline postures that we can note when uneasiness arises. Watch to see if the person opens up ventrally as they become more relaxed. I find that when I give lectures, many of the participants initially will sit with their arms crossed and then loosen them over time. Obviously, something happens to elicit this behavior, probably greater comfort with their surroundings and their instructor. It could be argued that women or men cross their arms simply because they are cold. But this does not negate the nonverbal meaning, since cold is a form of discomfort. People who are uncomfortable while being interviewed, for example, suspects in criminal investigations, children in trouble with their parents, or an employee being questioned for improper conduct, often complain of feeling cold during the interview. Regardless of the reason, when we are distressed, the limbic brain engages various systems of the body in preparation for the freeze, flight, or fight survival response. One of the effects of is that blood is channeled toward the large muscles of the limbs and away from the skin. And this is because of the flight or fight. When took a I took a body language class at a suburb of Portland's police department, and it was a huge class. I was very impressed with the number of people that attended. And one of the videos that the instructor used was of a fatality of an officer responding to a traffic stop. And the driver of the subject vehicle exited the exited the vehicle, extended his arms in a crucifix manner, in a cross manner, and then began repeatedly and almost rhythmically pulling his arms together as if he was doing flyweights, or very, exaggerated hand clapping. And that was to get the blood pumping into his extremities before he ended that officer's life. Um, and in the class, they had a significant portion dealing with NLP, neuro linguistic programming, and the eye movement. You look, establish which eye is dominant, and this eye, once you do that, this eye movement represents the visual memory, the touch memory, the sound memory. You um, but it was, the fact that they're actually incorporating that into law enforcement training, I found to be fascinating because for several decades, at least since the 80s, if not the 70s, there's been a huge campaign to discredit NLP. So, but going back to that, the rapid, moving the arms, in a fly movement, as if you're doing flyweight, laterals. Um, all right, so let's see. Uh, lost my place. Found it. All right. One of the effects is that blood is channeled toward the large muscles of the limbs and away from the skin in case those muscles will need to be used to escape or combat the threat. As blood is diverted to these vital areas, some people lose their normal skin tone and will actually look pale as if they are in shock. Since blood is the main source of our body warmth, diverting blood away from the skin and into deeper muscles makes the body's surface feel cooler. Ledoux, 1996, page 131 through 133. For example, in the interview mentioned earlier, in which the young man clutched the pillow, he complained of being cold the whole time we were there, even though I turned the air conditioner off. Both his father and I were fine. He was the only one complaining about the temperature. That's the inset that we're going to read next before concluding this section. The next one is torso bow. So let me pop over there. All right, it's box inset number 21, pillow talk. All right, so pillow talk. When we see individuals suddenly protecting their torsos, we can assume they are not comfortable and that they sense themselves to be in some kind of threatening or dangerous situation. In 1992, while working with the FBI, I interviewed a young man and his father in a hotel room in the Boston area. The father had agreed, reluctantly, to bring the young man to the interview. While sitting on the hotel couch, the young man grabbed one of the couch pillows and held it close to his chest for most of the 3 hour interview. Despite the presence of his father, this young man felt vulnerable and therefore needed to tightly clutch a security blanket. While the barrier was only a pillow, it must have been quite effective for this individual because there was just no getting through to him. When you watch videos of real police interrogations or see them on television, or perhaps you may have even experienced yourself. They've got the uncomfortable chair that typically doesn't move, or it's heavy enough that it doesn't roll or turn, or it's just static but heavy enough that it doesn't naturally scoot back when you go to bump it. And it's, if I'm not mistaken, I've heard stories that some of them are ill-sized, just a little bit lower or a little bit taller, so that people's natural leg length is not, their feet aren't quite touching the floor, or their knees are up too high. This is all done to increase discomfort, so that the brain is having to compensate should they be lying, is the goal. I'm the What they use is the REID, the REID in a lot of cases, and I've I've seen the training where they say it's a compelled confession based off of that effort. But do be aware that giving somebody too many options allows them too many chances to create these barriers, such as the pillow. And that's why an interrogation room is sterile, not just safety, but less items that they can use to deflect and protect themselves. I mean, you're going to be nervous no matter who you are, unless you're Emily Nutley going into court to change your plea. Yeah, and that's only because Judge Jenny from the bench branch had offered her probation, most likely. We'll find out in early to mid June. Let's see. I found it remarkable that when the subject was neutral, such as when we talked about his involvement in sports, he would put the pillow aside. However, when we spoke of his possible complicity in a major crime, he would retrieve the pillow and press it tightly against his torso. It was clear that the only time his limbic brain felt the need to protect his torso was when he felt threatened. He never did reveal anything at this meeting, but the next time he was interviewed, the comforting pillows were conspicuously absent. That is, though, also that that can be a tool. It does make more hoops for you to jump through, but it'll, how people do things. The On the behavior table of elements, there is a subset that deals with object interaction. Chair legs is the one that we've most recently documented in the videos. And in this case, using a pillow as a shield, by having that there, you can at least establish a pattern to which they're going to respond to use a shield to protect themselves from a certain line of questioning. Yes, you have to jump through more hoops, but now you've isolated a certain group of questioning. Now you remove the distractions, the opportunities to use physical objects as barriers. So it is at least a way of ascertaining whether there needs to be further questioning. That's one option. All right, this has gone on longer than the previous two. I'll be back with the next section, which is, if I'm not mistaken, it was called the torso bow. Let's see. Too far. Come on. The torso bow. All right. Thank you for watching. Any questions or comments of how this training is impacting you, or how something isn't making sense, please ask or contribute. Have a great day.